Hello! We are so close to the end here, guys. We have states of consciousness in these slides and one more set, the effects of psychoactive drugs, and we are all review after that. Remember too, we actually have been reviewing all year, so we should be in good shape. Now, as we look at consciousness, know a few things. One, if you go back to William James back in the early 1900s, he questioned whether or not consciousness existed and whether or not it should be studied because he concluded that there's no way to study it scientifically. And really, at the time, he was probably right. Watson, about a decade later, Watson, the behaviorist, he is going to say, like, what's the point? Like, discard any reference to consciousness, just focus on observable behavior. The current view by most psychologists, even those in fields who would have disregarded it previously, is that we should study consciousness because it can be linked to observable behaviors like talking, brain waves, that sort of thing. But it is a psychological construct, so you can't see it or touch it. You can't directly measure it without agreeing upon operational definitions for it. But that's similar to intelligence, and they've certainly studied that, or emotion, same thing. So with consciousness and what this means, it's what you're aware of right now. So your sights, sounds, smells, tastes, what you can feel. In fact, if you were in therapy and you were really anxious, you were having, a lot of anxiety at this particular moment, a lot of acute anxiety, one of the things that they could help you with is grounding techniques. And that would be making you aware of your senses. And so it's like you do 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So it'd be like, what are 5 things you can see? Like locate them, label them. What are 5 things, then you'd go down to 4 things you can hear. And so on, straight down to taste, which would be the 1. And focusing in on all of these senses, making them all conscious, helps to ground you. But you want to think of consciousness as like selectively attending. So it's not just the senses, it's you attending to them selectively. It's going to make senses keener, if you will. Sudden changes in our sensory world will cause our attention to shift towards the change or novel stimuli. So this idea of consciousness, it would be our direct inner awareness, awareness of our senses, awareness of our emotions, our memories, our mood, our ability to think about past events, about abstract ideas like love and fairness, our sense of self, our sense of being like a unique individual separate from other people. This would all be part of consciousness. So our controlled processes, which would cause a high level of arousal, would be those mental activities that require focused attention, and they're going to interfere with other ongoing activities. So controlled processes or high level of consciousness would be needed to learn a new task. Or if you are taking a test and you're so absorbed in taking an exam that you completely forget about your surroundings until the instructor announces that it's time, the time's up and it's time to turn in your test. That would be controlled high level of consciousness. And next would be your automatic processes. This would require like sort of a middle level of or mid-level of arousal. You're aware of what you're doing, but minimal attention is required. So if you can think of driving a car, once you've learned to drive a car, or I guess while you're learning, it takes controlled high level of arousal and processing, right? But once you've learned and it will become more automatic. So you can drive and pay attention and be aware while you're driving, but still talk to your friends or listen to the radio, pursue your own thoughts, that sort of thing. I put this here because I want you to know that a lot of the study of consciousness and unconsciousness, it does come from Freud. He wasn't the first person to say that we have this unconscious level of processing, but he certainly pulled it into mainstream. And it probably one of his bigger contributions in that way. And know that when you're talking about Freud's level of unconsciousness, you are looking at immoral urges, violent motives, fears, unacceptable sexual desires, irrational wishes, selfish needs, shameful experiences. It was all stuff like that. Most of us would not view the unconscious as being that way. Preconscious, this would be memories, stored knowledge, things that you can access, and your conscious level, your thoughts and perceptions. Just remember, this is Freud's view, and this is unnecessarily dark compared to the way most people would view it. Non-conscious would be bodily processes that are controlled by your mind that you're almost never aware of, like your heartbeat, respiration, digestion. A lot of what would be controlled by the medulla would fall into this category. It's not that you are never aware of it, and it's not that you can't exercise some ability to override, but it's a limited ability. Your preconscious would be things that you are not currently thinking about, but are ultimately easy to access. Like if I asked you to remember what your favorite toy was as a child, you're probably not thinking about your favorite toy, but it would be easy for you to recall that memory. Your subconscious is information that you are not consciously aware of, but you know it exists because it affects your behaviors. And honestly, that's more of a psychoanalytic term there. I guess it's moved into mainstream. And again, that unconscious, that psychoanalytic view that some events and feelings are unacceptable to our conscious mind and are repressed. Remember that a lot of people have a view of the unconsciousness that doesn't follow the psychoanalytic or psychodynamic view. And lastly, your altered states of consciousness. This is any mental state other than waking consciousness. So it's found in sleep, dreams, psychoactive drug use, daydreaming fantasies, hypnosis, meditation, fasting. If you think back to the memory unit when we talked about state-dependent memory, that's what we're talking about. Whatever the state of consciousness that you're in, you are in that state again, like a highly meditative state. You're more likely to remember things that happened when you were in that state before. And we're moving on to sleep and dreams, or waking and sleeping. First, to look at your biological rhythms. So there are a number that we have. We have these annual cycles, seasonal variations that you'd see with bears in hibernation. It would affect people that have seasonal affective disorder. You see the 28-day cycles, as in like a menstrual cycle, 24-hour cycle, which is what we're going to look at with our circadian rhythm, and a 90-minute cycle, which would be our sleep cycle. So this circadian rhythm, these biological changes that occur on a 24-hour scale, they are going to affect our temperature, our awareness, so how alert we are. It affects our mood, our blood pressure, metabolism, pulse. All of these things are going to follow our circadian rhythms. And you can, in many ways, think of it as your sleep-wake cycle. It would control when you're hungry. It would affect, I don't know if you've noticed when you've been sick before, that you hit that in the afternoon, maybe 3-4 o'clock in the afternoon, you're feeling a lot better. And as the evening approaches, you start to feel more sick again. That is also tied to your circadian rhythm. So some of the things that will affect our circadian rhythm would be our hypothalamus, remember, responsible for the 4 F's, fight, flight, feeding, and sex. It's also responsible for temperature regulation. That pineal gland, which is that endocrine gland that's located in the middle of the brain, it's going to secrete melatonin more at night than during the day. Obviously, there's a lot more to it, but we don't have to get into what's happening in your retina, in your lungs, your GI tract. But what you do need to know is that it's important to recognize when circadian rhythms are disrupted. So if you think of shift workers, people in healthcare, data processing, transportation, people like this, people whose schedules change, they have more accidents and tend to be less productive as a result of the circadian rhythm shifts. And unfortunately, this could cause people to be not at their most alert when we need them to be very alert. And so a lot of accidents will happen when people have a disrupted circadian rhythm. They found with people that have to work in shifts that rotating the schedules every 3 weeks instead of every week tends to help out a bit. And brief naps can also help productivity. But it can help your productivity really for everyone, whether or not your circadian rhythm is disrupted. And whether or not your circadian rhythm is disrupted, you want to kind of think of where your circadian peaks might be. You are really more of a morning person? Are you more of a night owl? Because, think of where you do your best work and try to put your best stuff there. In other words, try to be productive when you know you're in your good focus zone. And the other thing about this, too, is that although we are on a 24-hour biological clock, our bodies tend to want to push to 25 hours. So it seems to be easier to stay up a little later than it is to get up a little earlier in the morning. And as I talk about sleep, I feel like it's so important for me to mention this here because sleep deprivation is so bad for you. And it can be absolutely used as a form of torture. And after about 72 hours, though, without sleep, you will slip into these repeated periods of microsleep. It doesn't last very long, maybe a few seconds at a time. But that few seconds, depending on what you're doing, could be life or death. So if you are, behind the wheel of a car or operating machinery and you're sleep deprived, you're dangerous. You're putting yourself and others at risk. To mention other stuff, like sleep deprivation is going to increase your level of stress, decrease your self-esteem, it decreases your motivation, it alters your mood, it can make you more irritable. And I do wonder, now that we have been learning remotely for a period of time, how many of you have dramatically shifted your circadian rhythm? I don't know, say, what time you're eating breakfast right now, but remember, you were eating lunch at 11:04 in many cases. And your body does get used to that. I know when you start the school year, 11:04, I always have fifth period lunch. And so 11:04, and at the beginning of the year, I'm like, not even hungry yet. And then at some point in the year, it's like by 10:30 now, I'm starving for lunch because I've gotten used to the 24-hour schedule. Okay, so looking at your sleep stages, it takes about 90 to 100 minutes to pass through about 5 sleep stages. And actually, you have to learn to connect the stages. Infants are not born knowing how to connect their sleep stages, which is why they wake up so frequently. Actually, sometimes parents are waking them up because, if a kid sleeps for about 90 minutes for a sleep cycle, which is about as the short span that they sleep, they'll start fussing. And a new parent will go in and be like, okay, what's the matter? To go pick up the child. And they actually sometimes startle the child and wake them up because they weren't completely conscious. They were just in between 2 sleep cycles. So your brain waves are going to change as you go through your sleep cycles or your sleep stages. The first 4 stages would be considered NREM or non-REM sleep. The 5th stage is REM sleep, REM being that rapid eye movement, that's where you're dreaming. And this is what the results of an EEG would look like. So essentially what's going to happen here is as you go to sleep, first here you are, you're awake and you're relaxed. As you go to sleep, stage one is a very brief period of sleep. It usually lasts about 1 to 5 minutes and occupies approximately 2 to 5% of a normal night of sleep. Your eyes will begin to roll slightly. It consists mostly of theta waves, so high amplitude, low frequency waves. You'll get these brief period of alpha waves, similar to those present while you're awake. Sometimes here you can also have a hypnagogic period, which is, again, it's happening really pre-stage 1 or in stage 1. It's this feeling of floating, weightlessness. Sometimes you might get visual images like flashing lights and colors, some swift, jerky movements that people will make or feel like they're slipping or falling. It doesn't happen a lot. It may be why people think they see UFOs. I think anytime I've seen this where you get these bold colors that seem to be happening on the back of your eyelids and you're sort of aware of it. Anytime that's happened to me, I've been like, oh, look at that, and it just disappears. And then I'm awake. So stage 2 or NREM 2 is really your baseline of sleep. It's going to come right after stage 1. Oh, what do you know? 1, then 2. Honestly, no big surprise. Then 3, then 4. The rest of it might surprise you, but 1, 2, 3, 4. But in stage 2, it's going to be part of the 90-minute cycle that repeats. Stage 1 really just happens right at the beginning. Stage 2, you are going to get these occasional bursts of rapid, high amplitude brain waves known as spindles. And you're going to become progressively more relaxed. So you see this burst of activity here. You will also see it look like this over here. So you look for that. If you get a chart like this, a reading from an EEG, and you see the spindles like that, you know you're in stage 2. Stage 3 and 4, you get high amplitude delta waves. It's actually pretty hard to wake up from stage 3 and stage 4 sleep. So even like if somebody were yelling your name, this is the stage where we'd have a little bit more trouble getting you up. This is also the stage where children are more likely to wet their beds or sleepwalk. I think that a lot of people think that sleepwalking must happen while a child is dreaming, but actually it's unlikely to happen there. It can, but it's very unlikely. And I want you to notice with stage 3 and 4 sleep that the amplitude increases dramatically as compared to the earlier stages of sleep. So this sleep cycle is essentially going to go like this. So NREM 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, REM. You shouldn't go back to the first stage of sleep. And I know a lot of people think like, oh yeah, wow, I don't dream, and that's that rapid eye movement. But everybody dreams. You just might not remember it, and it is possible to have a dreamless night of sleep. There are usually reasons for that, but people will dream. REM sleep is also considered this paradoxical sleep because it's considered your lightest and your deepest sleep. It isn't actually your deepest sleep, but it is a pretty deep sleep. And what happens here, and what I mean by that, is that it's you're pretty deep in sleep, but you're easy to awake during a dream cycle. In fact, that's when you're likely to remember a dream, is when you wake up during one. If you're on a good normal sleep schedule, your dreaming will take up about 20 to 25% of your night, and it is actually necessary. So you'll notice changing in breathing, heart rate, brainwave activity. You can dream in color. What's so interesting though is that you dream in color but not in sound. You're not hearing anything, but you're seeing something. So if you're actually monitoring brain activity while people are sleeping, there's no auditory stimulus, but you are noticing visual pathways that are affected. You think you hear stuff in your dream, but you don't. You might be hearing something from the outside, outside of your world, in your dream world. So like if the television is on or something, that could affect your dreams for sure. But the dreams themselves don't make any sound. The other thing is that you play every role in your dream, which is kind of a fun thought. So you dream that somebody's being a complete jerk to you. Well, you just dreamt that you were being a complete jerk to yourself, which is kind of funny. Because if you think about it, there's nobody else in your head to control the different characters, if you will, or the storyline as it will appear to go in your dream. But we also notice that there are common themes when people dream. So you might notice that like somebody's trying to chase you, and so there's a problem. For whatever reason, you can't run. You can't get your shoes on. You can't move like you're trying to run, but something's holding you back. You're stuck somewhere. These are pretty common themes. And the reason for these common themes, it's really because while you are in REM sleep, your eyes are moving, but your body, your main muscles are, like motor muscles, are going to be physically paralyzed. So you can't actually move your legs and your arms while you are dreaming. You should not be able to do that. Which is why we experience this whole like, okay, I'm trying to like get away from these people and I can't move that quickly. It's because you're trying to move those body parts and you cannot. And your brain will figure out a way to interpret that inability to move and put it in the storyline of your dream. If your reticular formation tells you like, wait, this is really important, like, oh my gosh, you're in danger, like if you were to fall off of a cliff or something in your dream, like you look like you're about to fall or trip or something, you'll notice that sometimes you can like lurch right out of sleep. That's because your reticular formation has alerted your brain that there's an emergency and it needs your immediate attention. And you'll find that that's not an uncommon thing, though, for something either, to be interpreted into the storyline of your dream. Like you're trying to move your body parts and you can't, therefore your dream like does something with that. Let's say, well, I guess I had this happen. I had a weird dream where I was in a trailer. I don't know where I was or who I was with, which is also sort of common. It's like I have an idea that I know these people, but I don't actually know who they are or where I am. And for whatever reason, I was having trouble breathing. And so in my dream, people were smoking. And I was like, I got to get out of here. And so I went outside, and it was a really hot day, and I couldn't breathe. And next thing you know, I was waking up. I had managed to get 3 blankets on top of my face. And so I think I was having trouble breathing, and my dream interpreted it in a very sort of bizarre manner. And with that question, like, do your dreams mean anything? Well, sure. It's you making sense of stuff in your day. It's made up of all kinds of neural firings that make up you and your experiences. They will come together in odd ways. I personally am not one for interpreting them, although I've certainly enjoyed having my dreams interpreted by people that like to do that. But then you're getting all sort of psychoanalytic and psychodynamic there. So here I want you to notice a sleep cycle. You're awake, you go to sleep, you're into NREM 1. Notice what I was telling you, NREM 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2. You don't go back to 1, you go into REM. That's that orange color there, REM. REM 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, where you go back to REM again, and so on. And then as you move into the night, you're not getting into that deepest sleep anymore. So what'll happen is your NREM cycles will shorten as the night goes on. Your REM cycles will lengthen as your night goes on. So decreasing in stage 4, increasing in REM as the night continues. There are exceptions to that, though. If you are sleep deprived, you will find that you might have dreamless nights. Your body seems to need to make up NREM before it makes up REM, although REM is very important. And then if you are like kind of making up for sleep, like you're doing like sleep, you're trying to make up for sleep debt. So you burn the midnight oil to get stuff done for a period of time. And then you take the weekend and try to just like, catch up on all of that sleep. It doesn't work that way. You can't replace it like that. It actually takes a period of time of increasing your night's sleep substantially before you feel caught up and refreshed in that way. But when you are catching up on the other side, you will experience more dreams in your sleep. I've noticed a lot of kids coming back from college telling me about all of these, wild dreams they've been having since they've been home. And I'm like, okay, so you're getting more sleep than you had been getting at school while you're taking all of those exams. And it's no big surprise. It's typically how that works. So how much sleep do we actually need? It does vary by person. Some of us need more, some of us need less. I had a student come into my room last year and said that he was feeling off because he only got 10 hours of sleep and he's used to getting 12. And other kids in the room were like, what? But it is, I guess, what you are used to. 12 did seem like a high number, though. So we all need different amounts. Infants need the most. About 2/3 of their day is spent sleeping. And children outside of that will get 8 to 10 hours. By the time you hit puberty, about 8 to 9 hours. And adults should sleep about 1/3 of their day. And I know as you guys are looking at this, I'm sure most of you are calculating that you're not getting enough sleep. So in the case of a sleep deficit, a couple things to keep in mind. It could take about a week of getting like 12 to 14 hours of sleep a night before you really reverse that deficit. But good sleep habits. Not viewing the nighttime as the time to get work done. So have a bedtime, and whatever that is, 10 p.m., 11 p.m., and it's like, that's it. That's when I'm asleep. I'm not looking at the computer, not looking at my phone. I'm in bed. I get up the next day. And it's actually easier to set it by finding a time that you need to get up. So it's 8 a.m. or 9 a.m. or whatever the time is. That's the time you get up in the morning. And then kind of let the fact that you're going to start getting tired then in the evenings help to set that for you. And with daylight savings, editorializing, I'm not actually sure why we still do this, but you will notice that with spring, the spring time change, that hour lost, you see an increase in the numbers of accidents after the time change as compared to the Monday before the time change. And when you look at the fall, when a sleep hour is gained, you compare the Monday before to the Monday after, and you will see fewer accidents. And again, that kind of pushes us in that thinking of we might be more headed towards a 25 rather than a 24-hour cycle, thanks to Thomas Edison and the light bulb. So why do we need to sleep? We spend so much of our time sleeping, and sometimes it's like, or not enough, or whatever. We're lamenting it in one direction or the other, the need to sleep or not getting enough. So there's a couple theories. One, the evolutionary circadian theory is going to say that, like, essentially animals needed to conserve their energy when they weren't looking for food or mates. And they needed to be able to stay still to protect them from being noticed by predators. So it has survival value in that manner. The other theory is the repair restoration theory. So this is saying that sleeping helps us to recover from the physical fatigues and emotional and intellectual demands of the day. This would give neurons time to repair themselves. It gives you a time to build up resistance to infection. It helps to recover from stress, helps you to work out problems. It plays a role in growth. The pituitary gland releases growth hormones during a deep sleep. Sleep deprivation can cause slurred speech, which I think I'm experiencing at the moment. It could make you irritable, could cause memory lapses, can make you feel like you're going crazy a little bit. So this came out of a study done at Cornell University. If you answered true to 3 or more items, you were probably not getting enough sleep. So what they recommend, or what he recommends, is that you go to bed 15 minutes earlier than usual every night for the next week, and continue doing this until you've added 15 more minutes of sleep to your night comfortably. So you should ultimately have the goal of waking up without an alarm clock and feeling alert all day. So let's look here do this for yourself. I need an alarm clock in order to wake up at the appropriate time. Number 2, it's a struggle for me to get out of bed in the morning. 3, weekday mornings I hit the snooze bar several times to get more sleep. Number 4, I feel tired, irritable, and stressed out during the week. Number 5, I have trouble concentrating and remembering. Number 6, I feel slow with critical thinking, problem solving, and being creative. 7, I often fall asleep watching TV. 8, I often fall asleep in boring meetings or lectures or in warm rooms. 9, I often fall asleep after heavy meals or after a low dose of alcohol. 10, I often fall asleep while relaxing after dinner. 11, I often fall asleep within 5 minutes of getting into bed. 12, I often feel drowsy while driving. Please don't drive drowsy. 13, I often sleep extra hours on weekend mornings. 14, I often need a nap to get through the day. And 15, I have dark circles around my eyes. This should give you a pretty good indication of your sleep debt. And we move on to dreams. So dreams, a sequence of images, emotions, and thoughts passing through a sleeping person's mind. This is REM sleep, your rapid eye movement, that paradoxical sleep that we were talking about. Remember, it doesn't consist of sounds, it's images. And idea behind the movie Inception, where you can kind of go into levels of dreaming, knowing how much extra time you get while you are there. The premise of that entire movie is wrong, because dreams actually happen in real time. So why do we dream? What's the point of this? If you were to look at the psychoanalytic or psychodynamic view, dreams are about wish fulfillment. Freud would say that dreams are the key to understanding our inner conflicts. Ideas and thoughts that are hidden in our unconscious mind will be there. It's full of symbolism. You remember Jung is going to really go off with that idea of symbols in dreams. And it has manifest and latent content. So your manifest content is the remembered storyline of your dream. So maybe you dreamt about a previous day's experience or something that you're preoccupied with. Your latent content would be the underlying meaning of your dream. So I had a friend say to me once, I had a dream where I was running for president, which is that would be really weird. Running for president, and I was debating Clinton, so it kind of tells you, not Hillary, her husband Bill. I was debating Clinton in a treehouse, and while he was speaking, all of a sudden I noticed that there were spiders and maggots all over the floor, and I couldn't focus on the question being asked. So I told my friend about this dream because it seemed so bizarre on so many levels. And she had some funny things to say about the latent content. So the manifest content is what I told you. For her, the latent content, she defined the maggots as an ex-boyfriend, and I don't know, she didn't like him. And then she defined the spider. She said a spider showing up in a dream is good luck. So the fact that there's so many spiders meant that there's a lot of good things coming my way. I don't know that I bought into any of it. In fact, probably none of it, but it was really entertaining nonetheless. When you take it from a Freudian point of view, it tends to be more aggressive or sexually driven. So you have a dream about a journey, that's your manifest content. Latent content, that was a symbol for death. You have a dream about horseback riding or dancing, that's your manifest content. The latent content would be that was a dream about sex. You have a dream about a gun, that's your manifest content. The latent content, what does the gun represent? Well, according to Freud, the gun would represent a penis. So that's the manifest versus latent content. Obviously, the interpretation of dreams is very subjective. The biological view on why we dream is called the activation synthesis theory. So dreams are a byproduct of random stimulation of cells during REM cycle or during REM sleep. Specific neurons spontaneously fire, and the cortex struggles to make sense out of all the random stimulation. Thus, you get a storyline. And that's like I was saying, you try to run, your amygdala, strong emotions there, it's activated. But you can't move because your muscles are temporarily paralyzed during REM sleep. So your brain will interpret that. And when I say that it's a random neural firing, and you kind of put together whatever story that makes up, it doesn't mean that your dreams are random, because your interpretations of them are often meaningful. It depends on your personality, motivations, memories, life experiences. They're going to show up in your dreams. The cognitive view is called the information processing theory. So dreams act to sort out and understand the memories that you experienced that day. So it helps to convert memories into long-term learning. Think of it as kind of like defragging your hard drive. So you learn all of this information, then you go to bed. You want to go to bed, remember, about an hour after you've studied, which will typically work out by the time you get to bed and get to sleep. No matter when you've been studying, it should work out pretty well. You go to bed, and your brain will help you consolidate those memories. A good night's sleep will actually help you to remember things. If you're sleep deprived, you're not getting enough sleep, you're going to forget stuff. And in case I didn't make the point, like I said, your sleep cycle, NREM 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, REM. Then it's NREM 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, REM, like that again. And eventually you're not going to the stage 4 sleep. NREM is going to get shorter as the night progresses, and REM gets longer. If you're sleep deprived, you make up NREM first. And I know I mentioned that. But you can also have REM rebound. So you make up a lot of REM sleep on the other side of that. So sleep deprived, making up your sleep, a lot of NREM, followed by some nights with heavy, heavy REM. So looking at sleep disorders, the first thing, dysomnias. So a dysomnia is a problem with the amount, timing, or quality of your sleep. So insomnia would be persistent and recurring difficulty falling asleep or staying asleep. It's not once in a while. if you have a big test coming up and you had trouble sleeping as a result, or, a couple nights leading up to it had a little trouble sleeping, that's not insomnia in terms of a problem. And honestly, there's a common misconception. It is impossible to know the moment at which you fall asleep. So a lot of people think they didn't sleep when they did. They also think they need more sleep than they do, or they think that they were sleeping for less time than they were. And it is also totally normal to have trouble falling asleep on nights where you are excited or anxious about something. But know that insomnia has a lot of comorbidity with it. In other words, it shows up with other disorders. So you will see insomnia or hypersomnia, which is excessive sleeping. You will see insomnia or hypersomnia with depression. You can see it with substance abuse, anxiety disorders, and the like. And I know sometimes people take something to help them sleep. This could affect actually the quality of sleep. It has a high risk of dependence, and insomnia by itself can happen. It's so frequently a symptom of something else that it's better often to treat whatever the underlying problem is instead of the insomnia itself. Sleep apnea is essentially when you stop breathing while you are sleeping and you momentarily reawake. So you have a really bad night's sleep. It could occur as many as 400 times in a single night. Often people who have sleep apnea snore. Most of them are overweight men, but it can happen to anybody really. And it also affects people with high blood pressure. It seems that people with sleep apnea often, not in every case, but often have this problem when they're lying on their back. That's where they're having the trouble breathing. So it's better that they sleep on their sides. And one sort of like easy treatment for sleep apnea is you just cut tennis balls in half and sew them on the back of pajamas so that if somebody wants to sleep on their back, it's uncomfortable to do so, which means that they'll sleep on their sides and will consequently get a better night's sleep. But this can be serious. Like I said, it can cause insomnia, high blood pressure. It could cause stroke and heart attack. So if you or somebody you care about has sleep apnea, it's worth looking into. And narcolepsy, which would be the last dysomnia we will look at, is characterized by uncontrollable sleep attacks. So the sudden, irresistible onsets of sleep during normal waking hours. This REM-like sleep intrudes waking consciousness. And it happens at various levels. So you'll see here, some type of strong emotional trigger or stress, and the person could find themselves experiencing some level of cataplexy, so partial or complete, where they're experiencing weakness in the face and neck, weakness in the limbs and trunk, or, a full-on going to sleep. The causes of this and the cures are really unknown. Long naps and stimulants or antidepressants tend to reduce the frequency of these attacks, but obviously this would all have to be monitored by a doctor. So where dysomnias were problems with the amount, timing, or quality of sleep, parasomnias are problems during sleep. Starting with night terrors, they occur during stage 3 or 4 of NREM. They don't happen during REM. A night terror and a bad dream or a nightmare are not the same thing. So it's characterized by high arousal and an appearance of being terrified. Like I said, it occurs in stage 4, not REM, and the child will often not remember that they had experienced it. They wake up, one of my kids had night terrors, and it was awful. He would wake up around the same time every single night, and it would take anywhere from 20 minutes to an hour and a half to calm him down and get him back to sleep. But he never remembered it ever happening. Now, it typically lasts up until age 8. We saw relief before age 8, well before age 8. So if you look here at the sleep cycle, this is where night terrors occur. This is where nightmares occur. Not the same thing. Sleepwalking is a sleep disorder that affects an estimated 10% of all humans at least once in their life. I apologize about the spelling error there. I didn't catch it. Sleepwalking most often occurs during non-REM sleep. And if you think about that, right, so an NREM 3 or 4, which is why it's hard to wake them up, if it were happening during REM sleep, you would get more of a dream. It shouldn't happen. Remember that paradoxical sleep where you're mostly paralyzed. You should not be able to move during a dream. I just think that like sleepwalking is scary enough. To move, to be able to actually physically move, to not be paralyzed during REM is a bigger problem. And somebody I know actually has this problem, and he and his wife have to sleep in different rooms because he could thrash during dreams and get very confused. And it's just safer for everybody that he just sleeps sort of isolated. And sleep talking, while considered a parasomnia, not typically a big deal. My entire family, I think, for the most part, we all sleep talk. In fact, when my siblings and I are all together under one roof, we're sleep talking at the same time. We start to talk with each other, which is sort of bizarre. Miguel, when we were first married, he used to wake up every morning and tell me what I said in my sleep, but he got used to it and doesn't tell me anymore. I don't even know if he notices it anymore. But this can happen during REM or NREM, either place.